So I recently popped in Star Fox Adventures for a bit of a nostalgia trip. So I went through some areas, I accomplished some tasks, I got a Krazoa spirit, I explored the palace, and man, my opinions on it, I I get my opinions on this game keep getting more and more extreme as I get older. Like as a kid, I didn't like it. Like there were some things I liked, there were some things I enjoyed. Right, I did finish it. But it was a disappointing title for a lot of reasons. It's a Star Fox game that's a Zelda clone that didn't turn out to be very good. And there's so many things I don't like about it, like the combat, the way the enemies are animated a lot of times, like the way that like enemies will like fly down on you and then just disappear when you hit them. Like little things like that just drive me nuts. The game is like simultaneously really really gorgeous and awful. Like you'll be exploring all these lush areas with like all these dinosaurs just standing around, and next you'll be in a weird cave with like these weird textures. Like the game really does feel kind of unfinished. It feels all over the place. Like it's one of those things that you think could have been great, but just falls flat in so many areas. But when the game is good, and there are times where it's good. When the game really shines, when it really does something it really wants to do, it's amazing. Like this game does absolutely have some of that classic Rareware charm. Not necessarily the Donkey Kong Country style of like perfection, but like more like the sort of perfect darkish or a Conquer sort of like personality to like the world and the characters. You know what I mean? Like starting the game, like playing as Crystal, like engaging General Scales, going to the Krazoa Palace, doing all this stuff, playing as Fox for the first. Like there are things about this game that are downright magical. Like this game, at times, right, sort of almost has this like sort of Princess Mononoke sort of, or Shadow of the Colossus sort of feel to it, like this sort of weird mystical quality. You know what I mean? I don't know how to explain it. I was going through the Krazoa Palace during this segment, right before you go to the walled city, right? I was just, all you have to do is just go up some vents and like step on a switch. It's boring, right? It's really straightforward and boring, but, and this is a big but the music was so gorgeous. Like the animation of when he like, the way like Fox gets like those purpley eyes when he has a Krazoa spirit inside of him, like the way he has to like bend down and like do that thing to like to revitalize it or put it in the statue or whatever. It's engaging. It's genuinely like, it actually feels like you're making some kind of big accomplishment, even though you didn't do a whole lot. You know what I mean? Like it does so much, right? Even as limited as it is, right? There's so much about it that's so impressive. Like you can't help but respect it. You know what I mean? Like the way some of these characters are animated. Like honestly, I was playing this game and just blown away by like by some of these gorgeous cutscenes. You know what I mean? Like some of the situations are interesting, where like you're going down the slope on like the jet ski, or the not the jet ski. What am I talking about? The snowmobile, the floating thing. The game has this weird mix of like futuristic technology and dinosaurs, and I just love it. And the whole Star Fox thing, like yeah, the Star Fox elements could have been like better implemented, but I don't think I mind them all that much. Like I was playing through this, right? And I was seeing like watching how Fox interacts with these other characters, and I was just like, you know what? I think Fox has more of a personality in this than I think in the other games. Like he sort of has his own motivations, he sort of has his own interests, like he responds to characters differently. He's kind of an asshole actually. He kind of reminds me of Conker in a weird sort of way. Like he's nothing like he is in the other games, where he's just some generic sort of shonen protagonist. Like here, it actually feels like, okay, he's putting up with some real bullshit. He has to look after this kid. He has to like, he's not allowed to like bring a gun onto this planet. Like he's doing this. He's literally saving the planet for money, right? Like that's literally the reason he's there because um, General Pepper thinks that if Dinosaur Planet explodes, that's gonna like ruin the entire Lilat system, right? Like because of how that planet is set up, right? The way that planet is structured. So like the magical energies will like somehow destroy the cause a lot of damage. I think is the way they put it. It's like the Lilat system. Like it's they do a I don't want to say they do a great job, with the character because like the voice acting is weird. Like I was just doing that segment with like the Walled City, and they do this thing where like they have a conversation about like Tricky and his dad and his like gatekeeper. He was a gatekeeper and how he sealed his like powers behind a gate. Like Fox is like interrupting her. Like the voiceover isn't good. The dialogue is stilted and awkward. But like you can tell, I don't know. Like I don't know if it was like because of how old the game was, or whatever. But like, well, for one thing, Conquer feels like it has better characters, better writing, better acting, better direction than this does. But this has like higher res character models. It's and the characters are more sympathetic at the same time. Conker's kind of an asshole, to the point where like you can't really take him seriously. Fox, not so much. Like you kind of do understand why he's kind of an asshole to these people. Like he's an outsider. He doesn't give a shit about their problems. He's just here to sort of resolve things. And by the end, he legitimately becomes friends with Tricky, right? And he he has to part ways with him at the end of the game, and that's kind of as I recall, that's actually pretty sad in its own way. I was looking up quotes from the game, and there's this very interesting feature in the game. It's a pretty good example of how half baked this game is. There's like this weird well in like under the warp stone where you can go down there and you can throw in cheat tokens and you can sort of like see predictions of the future, right? You can sort of see, you can sort of get hints for some reason about things that are going to happen in the game, and you get like all sorts of interesting tidbits of, well, not interesting, but like you get information about like, ooh, General Scales is not the real enemy. Ooh, an old friend is going to come back to help you, Falco. And last of all, eventually you will have to part ways with someone you've grown close to. Of course, in game, this is supposed to be in reference to like Fox and Tricky parting ways at the end of the game and not really having anything to do with each other in future installments, other than like a brief cameo in Assault. But to me, reading that, it feels more like an admission that this is the end for Rareware. This is the end. Like this is the last. This was absolutely the last Nintendo produced Rareware game. This was like the last game that Rareware ever produced, classic Rareware ever produced for Nintendo consoles. It still has some of that old spark. It's better than Grab by the Ghoulies and cameo elements of power for sure. It still has some of the creativity. It still has a lot of the things I love from classic Rare, but unfortunately, it doesn't come together well. It's weird. I think one of these days, when I become more established on YouTube, this is absolutely one of the games I want to go back and like 100% and like do a real YouTube video on. Like a real edited YouTube video going over like all the weird tidbits, all like everything I noticed, like weird lines of dialogue. I don't know. Like a true compilation, right, of like where they went wrong, like a real examination of just everything they've done, like everything they did with this thing. I would love to do that, and I think once I get a GameCube capture card, I might as well do that. I still haven't done the Devil's Third one. I need to get on that soon. I should have done that during my month off, but anyway. Star Fox Adventures, it's interesting. It's not a great game. I would say it's not even good, but in a weird way, I sort of respect it more than I think a lot of games that people consider classics. You know what I mean? Like I think I legitimately prefer it to stuff like Pikmin 2 or F-Zero GX or uh, a lot of other stuff, right? Like there are games, third party ones mainly that I can think of that are like very critically acclaimed, but I haven't played as much as this, that I haven't enjoyed as much as this. Like in spite of all the weirdness, in spite of all the flaws, in spite of all the issues, like I really love this game. I think it like was an interesting experiment. I think they could have done a lot more with it. Obviously, I wish it was better. Obviously, I kind of wish it was still like Dinosaur Planet. Like maybe if they had stuck with the original concept, it would have been better. I don't know. That's just speculation. Unless we get a copy of like Dinosaur Planet released on like N64 or leaked or whatever, um, maybe I I love these games, right? Like I love Star Fox. Um, yeah, Adventures. I think I prefer over Assault and Command, not Zero, but um, Adventures. I think was it could have been great. Like I think it could have been a great futuristic. It's simultaneously a Zelda game that's more stuck in the past, with the dinosaurs, and more futuristic with like the sci-fi elements. Like it could have been really really interesting. The same way that like Banjo Kazooie sort of sticks out from Super Mario 64. Like yeah, they have a lot of comparisons. There are a lot of things to talk about and to discuss, and about the two. Like they're very similar, but they still have their differences. Like they're still both absolutely worth playing. And I think this is the end of that era of Rareware, right? Where they were like deliberately, where they were respecting what Nintendo was doing and really trying to do right by them by making something, just as good but different. You know what I mean? Like they used to be able to do that with Donkey Kong Country, with Banjo Kazooie, like with all these great games, right? And the Microsoft buyout completely destroyed them. The Stampers bowed out. They stopped working on the games, I believe. They wanted out. People left the company, and now Rareware are desperately trying to remain relevant with like shit like Sea of Thieves. It's remarkable to me how people will seriously argue that like, well, Rareware made Sea of Thieves better, as if releasing a game and then adding a little bit more stuff to it makes it good. You know what I mean? Like, why couldn't they have just finished the game to begin with? You know what I mean? And the improved game still isn't very good. Like, people need to stop defending these companies and early access releases. Like, just it's like the No Man's Sky thing on like a considerably lower scale. Like, there's no reason you should be defending this game, but you're doing it just because it's Rareware, it's Microsoft. It's not like it's something horrible like Nintendo. It's just, Rareware is never coming back. Honestly, it's interesting. They're the complete opposite of Nintendo, I feel like. Whereas Nintendo has like stayed good, like over the past 30 years, right? Stayed very very relevant. Stayed on top of their game. Are constantly like innovating and doing new things. Rareware has basically declined into irrelevancy. It's probably the closest example of like Nintendo pulling a Sega, where this company that was synonymous with great Nintendo games has just declined into complete irrelevancy. It's embarrassing, it's sad, it's pathetic, and I suppose it might actually happen to Nintendo itself one day. Probably not anytime soon. I've seen no evidence of that. There's way too many good people at Nintendo for that to happen, and I think in the next 5-10 years. But who knows? You know what I mean? Like in the next 20 years, what's the gaming industry gonna look like? Honestly, at this point, I don't think I care. I'm at the point now where I'm sort of bowing out of gaming. Bowing out. I'm playing less games, focusing more on like art stuff, personal life stuff, family stuff. Gaming for me is kind of, I don't want to say it's over exactly, because I still spent a lot of time today playing video games, but it's not over exactly, but it's nowhere near as important as it used to be in that way. And that's kind of how I feel about Rareware. Like, it's one of those situations. Like, I am not upset that they're gone, really. Obviously, I wish they were still around, but it's important to have good existence. Like they existed at all. Like you should be happy that they existed at all, and that's kind of the mindset I have. Is that like I am eternally grateful for what they did during the '90s. You know, from Battletoads to Conquer, or I suppose Star Fox Adventures, nothing but stellar Nintendo games, other than Killer Instinct, which was garbage. Like, other than Killer Instinct, basically everything they put out was phenomenal. Like, again, I feel kind of strongly about other games. Like, Banjo-Tooie isn't as good as it could have been. Conquer is really overrated. Sure, they couldn't have... they didn't need to, like, have DK64 have an expansion pack that cost Nintendo millions, but... They could have been a lot... There are things they could have done better, right? There are things they could have changed, but, you know, a solid decade of some of my favorite games ever, that needs to be acknowledged. That will continue to be respected. The Rareware name isn't going to go away. I am still playing these games, showing these games to new people all the time, who fall in love with them. Donkey Kong Country, GoldenEye, Conquer, the list goes on and on. Like, people... even today, still love Rareware, and still love classic Rareware, I should say, and that is pretty special.